The rise and fall of Murder Inc. Now, if you were listening to hip-hop and R&B in the early 2000s, there was a moment when it felt like Murder Inc. completely ran the music industry. Ja Rule was everywhere. Ashanti was dominating radio. Every other hit song sounded like it came from the same formula: a melodic hook, a catchy chorus, and Ja Rule's raspy voice delivering verses that blended street rap with radio-friendly energy. For a few years, Murder Inc. was unstoppable. They had hit records, they had chart-topping albums, they had the radio locked, but then something happened that changed everything: a rap beef, a federal investigation, and one of the most aggressive new artists the rap world had ever seen, 50 Cent. In just a few years, the same label that dominated the early 2000s completely lost its grip on the industry. So how did Murder Inc. rise so quickly? And how did it collapse just as fast? To understand that story, we have to go back to the man who built the entire empire: Irv Gotti. Now, Irv Gotti wasn't just a record executive. He was a producer, a hustler, and someone who understood the music business in a way that many artists didn't. Before Murder Inc. even existed, Irv Gotti was already making noise behind the scenes in the rap industry. He had relationships with artists like Jay-Z and DMX, and had already started building a reputation as someone who could identify talent and create hit records. In fact, Irv Gotti was involved in the early success of one of the biggest rappers of all time, Jay-Z. During the late 90s, Irv helped produce several records for Jay-Z and worked closely with Def Jam, which helped him establish credibility within the industry. But Irv wasn't satisfied with just producing records for other artists. He wanted to build his own empire, and that vision eventually led to the creation of Murder Inc. Records. Now the name alone already sounded controversial. Murder Inc. It felt aggressive, dangerous, almost like a rap version of a mafia organization. But that branding actually worked in Irv Gotti's favor, because hip-hop in the late 90s was built on strong identities. Death Row had its image, Bad Boy had its image, and Murder Inc. was about to create its own lane. But before the label could dominate the charts, Irv needed an artist who could carry the brand, someone with the charisma, the voice, and the star power to compete with the biggest rappers in the world. And that artist turned out to be Ja Rule. Now, before Ja Rule became a superstar, his career actually started in a very different way. Early in his career, Ja Rule was associated with the rap group Cash Money Click alongside Chris Black in 2001. The group had some buzz in New York, but things didn't fully take off the way they expected. However, one thing became clear very quickly: Ja Rule had a unique voice. That raspy delivery, that aggressive tone. When you heard Ja Rule on a track, you immediately knew it was him. And that uniqueness caught the attention of Irv Gotti. Once Irv started working with Ja Rule more closely, he realized that Ja had the potential to become something bigger than just another rapper in the New York scene. He had star potential. And once Murder Inc. officially launched under the Def Jam umbrella, Ja Rule quickly became the face of the label. Now, if you're enjoying the story so far, go ahead and hit the like button, because this is where things start getting interesting. Because Ja Rule's first major album would begin the rise of Murder Inc. But the formula that made the label famous wasn't just about street rap. It was something completely different. Something that would dominate radio in the early 2000s, rap mixed with R&B. And once that formula started working, Murder Inc. couldn't miss. Do me a quick favor and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you love hip-hop history and stories like this, you're going to want to stick around, because Fake Famous is where we break down the moments that shaped the culture. Now let's get back to the rise of Murder Inc. By the late 1990s, Ja Rule had officially become the centerpiece of Irv Gotti's vision. His debut album, Veni Vidi Vici, dropped in 1999 and immediately made noise in the rap world. One of the biggest songs from that album was Holla Holla. The record had an aggressive energy that fit perfectly with the sound of New York hip-hop at the time. Ja Rule's voice was raw, intense, and unmistakable. The song became a street anthem and helped introduce him to a national audience. But even though Veni Vidi Vici was successful, something interesting happened as Ja Rule's career continued. Irv Gotti started noticing that Ja's voice worked incredibly well alongside R&B singers. That observation ended up becoming the formula that would change everything. Instead of focusing purely on hardcore rap records, Irv Gotti began blending Ja Rule's gritty delivery with smooth R&B hooks. At the time, that combination wasn't as common as it is today, and when the formula started working, it worked extremely well. Ja Rule's next projects leaned heavily into that style, and the results were huge. Songs like Between Me and You, featuring Christina Milian, showed a softer, more melodic side of Ja Rule that radio stations loved. But the real turning point for Murder Inc. came when Irv Gotti discovered a young singer from New York named Ashanti. Now, Ashanti didn't just become another artist on the label, she became one of the most important pieces of the entire Murder Inc. sound. Ashanti's voice had a smooth, emotional quality that balanced perfectly with Ja Rule's rough delivery. When they started making music together, the chemistry was undeniable, and once those songs started hitting the radio, the label's momentum exploded. Records like Always on Time and Mesmerize became massive hits. Suddenly, Ja Rule and Ashanti were dominating both the hip-hop charts and the R&B charts at the same time. The formula was simple. Ja Rule delivered the gritty verses. Ashanti carried the melodic hooks, and the result was hit after hit. For a few years, it felt like every major radio station was playing a Murder Inc. record. Ja Rule became one of the most recognizable voices in hip-hop. Ashanti became a superstar in her own right, and Irv Gotti had successfully built one of the most powerful labels in the industry. Now, if you were outside during the early 2000s, you probably remember just how big those records were. They were everywhere. Clubs, radio, music videos, even movie soundtracks. Murder Inc. had figured out how to dominate multiple audiences at the same time. Hip-hop fans loved the street energy of Ja Rule. R&B fans loved Ashanti's melodies, and the combination worked perfectly for mainstream radio. But success like that always attracts competition. And around the same time Murder Inc. was dominating the charts, a new rapper was quietly building his own movement. A rapper from Queens who had been shot 9 times. A rapper who had something to prove. 50 Cent. And once 50 Cent entered the conversation, everything about the rap industry started to change. Because while Ja Rule and Murder Inc. were focused on radio hits, 50 Cent was focused on war. And that war would eventually become one of the most famous rap beefs in hip-hop history. But before that conflict exploded, something else happened that started putting pressure on Murder Inc. from another direction. Not from the rap world, but from the federal government. And once that investigation began, the future of the entire label was suddenly in danger. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment and let me know your favorite Murder Inc. song. Was it Always on Time, Mesmerize, or one of Ja Rule's earlier records? Because in the next part of this story, we're getting into the moment that changed everything, the rise of 50 Cent, and the beginning of the feud that helped bring Murder Inc. crashing down. Before we get back into the story, hit that like button if you've been enjoying the video so far. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe to Fake Famous. We break down the biggest stories in hip-hop history, from legendary rap beefs to the rise and fall of entire music empires like this one. Now let's talk about the moment things started changing for Murder Inc. Because while Ja Rule and Ashanti were dominating the radio in the early 2000s, there was another rapper in New York who had a completely different mission: 50 Cent. Now, the interesting thing about this story is that the tension between Ja Rule and 50 Cent actually started before either of them became the superstars we know today. Both artists were coming out of Queens, New York, and their circles overlapped in the streets long before the rap industry got involved. According to several stories from people close to the situation, the conflict started after 50 Cent was allegedly robbed by someone connected to Ja Rule's crew. From that moment forward, the tension between the two camps started building. At first, it was just street issues. But once both artists started gaining attention in the music industry, those personal problems turned into something much bigger: a rap beef. And if you know anything about hip-hop history, you already know how dangerous rap beefs can become when two artists are determined to destroy each other's reputation. By the early 2000s, Ja Rule was already a massive star thanks to the success of Murder Inc. He had hit records on the radio, platinum albums, and a powerful label behind him. 50 Cent, on the other hand, was still building his name in the underground rap world. But what made 50 Cent different from most new artists was his strategy. He wasn't trying to compete with Ja Rule on radio, he was attacking him directly, through diss records, through interviews, through mixtapes. 50 Cent understood something important about hip-hop culture. Conflict creates attention, and attention creates momentum. One of the earliest moments that brought the feud into the public eye was when 50 Cent began openly criticizing Ja Rule's music and image. He accused Ja of being too focused on singing and making radio-friendly songs instead of staying true to hardcore rap. At the time, that criticism started resonating with certain fans, because while Ja Rule was dominating the charts with melodic hooks and crossover hits, a new wave of listeners was starting to crave something more aggressive, something darker, something more street. And 50 Cent was ready to deliver exactly that. His mixtapes started circulating heavily through New York and eventually across the entire country. Songs like Wanksta mocked Ja Rule and helped build 50 Cent's reputation as someone who wasn't afraid to challenge established stars. And slowly but surely, the narrative started shifting. What once looked like a one-sided battle began turning into something much more serious. Because the more 50 Cent attacked Ja Rule publicly, the more attention he gained. And the more attention he gained, the bigger his fan base became. But the real turning point came when one of the most powerful figures in hip-hop decided to get involved. Eminem. After hearing 50 Cent's music and recognizing his potential, Eminem signed him to Shady Records under the Aftermath umbrella, alongside Dr. Dre. That move completely changed the balance of power. Now 50 Cent wasn't just a hungry underground rapper throwing shots at Murder Inc. He had the backing of two of the most powerful names in the music industry, Dr. Dre and Eminem. And once that machine started moving behind him, 50 Cent's rise became unstoppable. His debut album, Get Rich or Die Tryin', exploded onto the charts in 2003 and instantly turned him into one of the biggest rappers in the world. Songs like In Da Club dominated radio and clubs everywhere. And at the same time, 50 Cent continued attacking Ja Rule and Murder Inc. in interviews, on mixtapes, and through diss records. The feud had officially gone from a street conflict to one of the most famous rivalries in rap history. But while the rap battle was heating up, something even more serious was happening behind the scenes. Something that had nothing to do with music. Federal investigators had started paying attention to Murder Inc., and once that investigation began, the entire label would soon find itself facing a crisis that no amount of hit records could fix. If you've made it this far in the video, drop a comment and tell me whose side you were on during this beef. Team Ja Rule or Team 50 Cent? Because in the next part of the story, we're going to talk about the moment the federal government raided Murder Inc.'s offices, and that moment would mark the beginning of the label's downfall. Before we continue the story, make sure you hit that like button if you've been enjoying the breakdown so far. And if you're new here, subscribe to Fake Famous because we drop hip-hop deep dives like this every week. Now let's talk about the moment when the entire rap landscape started shifting. Because while Murder Inc. was dealing with the federal investigation and the pressure from the industry, another movement was rising at the same time, G-Unit. When 50 Cent released Get Rich or Die Tryin' in 2003, the impact was immediate. The album didn't just perform well, it completely took over the rap world. Songs like In Da Club, Many Men, and 21 Questions were everywhere. Clubs, radio, music television. It felt like overnight, 50 Cent had become the biggest rapper in the world. But what made the situation even worse for Murder Inc. was the fact that 50 Cent wasn't rising alone. He brought an entire crew with him. G-Unit, artists like Lloyd Banks, Tony Yayo, and later Young Buck became part of the movement, and their music carried the same aggressive energy that fans were gravitating toward. The sound of hip-hop was changing. Where Murder Inc. had dominated the early 2000s with melodic rap records and R&B hooks, G-Unit brought the focus back to gritty street rap, and the audience responded immediately. Mixtapes from the G-Unit camp started flooding the streets. Diss records aimed at Ja Rule and Murder Inc. started circulating everywhere. And the momentum that once belonged to Murder Inc. was now shifting toward 50 Cent and his crew. For Ja Rule, this moment became incredibly difficult, because not only was he dealing with the pressure of the federal investigation surrounding the label, he was also facing one of the most relentless rap rivalries in hip-hop history. 50 Cent continued attacking Ja Rule publicly in interviews and on records. Fans started choosing sides, and over time, the narrative started changing. The same fans who once celebrated Ja Rule's radio hits began questioning whether his style still fit the direction hip-hop was heading. Meanwhile, G-Unit was becoming one of the most powerful brands in rap. Lloyd Banks dropped The Hunger for More. Young Buck released Straight Outta Cashville. G-Unit clothing became a huge streetwear brand, and everywhere you looked, 50 Cent seemed to be winning. Now, if you were outside during this time, you probably remember how intense the debate became. Was Ja Rule still a superstar? Or had 50 Cent completely taken his place? Because by the mid-2000s, the charts started reflecting what fans were already feeling. The dominance of Murder Inc. was fading. The radio hits weren't hitting the same. The momentum that once made the label unstoppable had slowed down dramatically. And while Ja Rule still had loyal fans, fans, the culture had already begun moving in a different direction. But even with all of that pressure, the final chapter of Murder Inc.'s story hadn't been written yet, because in the next part of this video, we're going to talk about the aftermath. What happened to Ja Rule? What happened to Irv Gotti? And how the legacy of Murder Inc. still influences hip-hop today. Before we close this story out, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you've been rocking with the video so far. And if you've been enjoying the breakdown, drop a like too, because this story right here is one of the wildest chapters in hip-hop history. Now let's talk about the aftermath, because even though the dominance of Murder Inc. started fading in the mid-2000s, the story didn't just end there. Hip-hop has a funny way of keeping old rivalries alive, and somehow, decades later, the Ja Rule and 50 Cent saga still finds ways to pop back up. But before we get to the recent drama, we have to talk about something that shook the hip-hop world in a completely different way. The passing of Irv Gotti. Now, no matter what people thought about Murder Inc., Irv Gotti was a huge figure in the culture. This was a guy who helped shape the sound of the early 2000s. He helped bring Ja Rule to superstardom. He discovered Ashanti, and for a few years, he built one of the most dominant hit-making machines hip-hop had ever seen. When Irv Gotti passed away, the reaction from the music industry was mixed. Some people reflected on his legacy, others revisited the controversies that surrounded Murder Inc. But if you know anything about hip-hop beef, you already know there was one person the internet was watching closely: 50 Cent. Because if there's one thing about 50 Cent, it's that he has never been known for letting old grudges go. And sure enough, when news broke about Irv Gotti's passing, 50 Cent did what 50 Cent always does. He went to Instagram. Now, if you followed 50 Cent over the years, you already know his Instagram page is basically a combination of trolling, comedy, and pure chaos. And when he posted about Irv Gotti, the internet immediately exploded. Memes started circulating. Fans started debating whether the post was disrespectful or just classic 50 Cent trolling. Some people thought it crossed the line. Other people said it was exactly the kind of petty behavior they expected from one of hip-hop's most notorious antagonists. Now, if you've ever watched TMZ interviews, you know how they operate. They pop up out of nowhere with cameras and start asking questions about whatever drama is trending online. And when they asked Ja Rule about the situation with Tony Yayo, his response caught a lot of people off guard. Ja basically said the beef was in the freezer, not the fridge. Not cooling off, the freezer. Which is actually a hilarious way to describe a rap beef that has been going on for more than 20 years. Because if you think about it, the Ja Rule and 50 Cent rivalry has lasted longer than some rap careers. It started in the late 90s, exploded in the early 2000s, and somehow still finds ways to show up in headlines decades later. But here's the deeper message behind this entire story. Hip-hop is built on competition, on ego, on artists trying to prove they're the best. Sometimes that competition creates legendary music. Sometimes it creates unforgettable rivalries. And sometimes it creates stories that last for generations. The rise and fall of Murder Inc. is one of those stories. For a moment in time, that label completely ran the rap industry. Ja Rule had the radio locked. Ashanti was dominating R&B, and Irv Gotti had built a hit-making machine that felt unstoppable. But hip-hop moves fast. New artists rise, new sounds take over, and sometimes the same forces that help build an empire are the ones that eventually bring it down. Yet even after everything that happened, the beef, the investigations, the collapse of the label, the impact of Murder Inc. is still part of hip-hop history. Those songs still play, those debates still happen, and those rivalries still get people talking. Because at the end of the day, hip-hop doesn't just remember the winners, it remembers the stories. And the story of Murder Inc. is one of the wildest chapters the culture has ever seen. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, drop a comment and let me know what you think. Did 50 Cent completely destroy Murder Inc.? Or do you think the label would have faded anyway because the industry was changing? And if you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe to Fake Famous because we've got a lot more hip-hop stories coming. Rap beefs, album deep dives, and the real stories behind the legends of the culture. I'll see you in the next video.